These days, with a lot of competition, that becomes an issue, particularly with deals that are intermediated. But if you're looking at the mid-cap space, there are still opportunities which are proprietary, and you will be able to whisk through the valuations a lot easier these days. I think that's probably generally across the board, and not necessarily, for private equity deals per se. Indonesia, has its volatilities still in the market, and that's driven by our capital markets, which is, still very much underrepresented in terms of number of participants that's active in the market. And so if you've got your top 10 stocks, tanking, that sort of sets the mood of the whole market. And fortunately or unfortunately, most of the investors into this capital market is still pretty much foreign investors who are susceptible to these short-term volatilities. But I think it's good news for private equity players, because it basically, sets the tone, of your negotiations with your investee companies. Well, if you take the definition of Southeast Asia being Singapore and Malaysia, certainly, we have, a lot more challenges in terms of investments here. But if you compare us to Vietnam or Cambodia and even the Philippines, I think, I would say that we are a lot more investor friendly, and, culturally, we're a lot more open to partnerships with foreign partners in particular. I think if you look at private equity 1.0 back in the mid-90s, where suitcase bankers or suitcase private equity investment officers come in and out with investment, that may work at that time, but I would have to say they were acting more like creditors rather than equity holders. Now that we're in this new era, that model is no longer suitable for a market like Indonesia. I think it becomes a lot more challenging for them to undertake that model. The next 5 years, frankly speaking, infrastructure is very attractive, but whether or not a fund should have focus there, needs to be needs to have a very focused strategy within infrastructure, because all of it is mainly greenfield. There are only a handful that's sort of up and running, that's non-state owned. The other sector that's definitely interesting is the natural resource sector. This is a country like Australia and even Brazil with a lot of natural resources. And this is a fairly new industry for Indonesia. Prior to '98, this industry was only controlled by a few global players and state-owned companies. But post '98, after the democracy kicked in, plus decentralization process has already been in place, you see a lot more participants in this industry coming from the domestic side. Of course, other than that, leveraging on the demographics, certainly the consumer play and the financial sector becomes a very attractive market. And the financial sector in Indonesia has got one of the largest returns in the world. And certainly a lot of investors are trying to take a part of those returns.